Okay. So, pleasant morning, everyone. I, Cheryl Yakata from WIM 37, on behalf of Balidasan Institute of Management, gladly welcome all the students, teachers, and researchers to Atheneum 2020. Atheneum is a research conference organized by the Center for Contemporary Management and Research, the research wing of Balidasan Institute of Management. Atheneum aims to embed contemporary research into management practices and vice versa. It involves senior academic experts, present the practically relevant contemporary research developments and insights, while the industry experts throw light on management issues that offer scope for future research. One of the areas with most relevance in recent times is data-driven decision-making. Trade constraints and risks posed due to new trends in global environment necessitates taking managerial decisions with global rationality. The emerging role of data analytics as a catalyst to make mistake-proof decisions at all management levels, therefore become critical specifically to globalization and localization context. Whenever we talk about data, never miss to say that it's the new oil, especially in digital economy where everything depends on numbers. So from this panel, we'll know more about data and its implications on business environment, how to manage this asset profitably, and why data-driven decision-making is the need of the hour in every business. Let me introduce our distinguished panelists to discuss on data and decisions. We have with us the chair for this panel, Dr. Bikramjit Chaudhary. Dr. Chaudhary is the Senior Vice President and Global Head, Advanced Analytics and Data Sciences at Datamatics Global Services Limited. He started his career as a senior research executive at Nielsen and later became the Senior Vice President at Nielsen. He has held key positions in reputed multinational organizations like KPMG, Seven Dots, and ZS Associates, working in Europe as well as in India. Dr. Chaudhary has received recognitions from ESOMA, NASSCOM, and various India houses in the country for his work and contribution in the field of research. It's a pleasure to welcome you, sir. Looking forward to the discussion. Next, we have Ms. Matanki Shri. She's the head of data, GoFood at Gojek, which was featured as the only Southeast Asian startup to be a part of Fortune's list of companies that changed the world. Ms. Matanki is a renowned data science leader in India. She has 11 patents, 20 patents published in intuitive customer experience, indoor positioning, and user profiles. She has 16 plus years of proven track record in building world-class data sciences solutions and products. She advises startups, enterprises, and venture capitalists on data science strategy and roadmap. Ms. Matanki is recognized as one of the phenomenal she by Indian National Bar Association in 2019. Welcome, ma'am. We are glad to have you here today. Or should I say welcome back, Mr. Munif Gupta, an alumnus of BIM, who has extensively worked in tech sector, with his last assignment as Indian Regional Director for Study Group. He started his career as Business Development Manager with IFCI and subsequently moved into Sunrise Tech sector of telecom and software, where he was the key member of startup team in launching new companies, services, and markets for existing services like Vodafone, Donnet, and Nortel. His key areas of expertise are defining and executing go-to-markets with new products, services, companies, and transforming businesses by leveraging new technology. He strongly believes in technology and education being great life leveler and execution being the key difference between a great idea and a sustainable business. Welcome again, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Glad, sir. If there are any questions during the discussion, please post it in the chat window. It will be addressed at the end of the discussion. Without any further ado, let's begin the discussion. Over to the chair, Dr. Bikramjit Chaudhary.
Thank you very much. And I'm really delighted to be sharing this session with a couple of my esteemed panelists on this very important topic related to data and decisions. Now, if you look at it a little bit more pragmatically, data to decisions possibly could have been even more appropriate, right? Because you start with data, then it gets sort of transformed and converted into information, to insights, to knowledge, to intelligence, and finally decisions, right? So it's the journey from data to decisions that really drives the proceedings in various spheres, in various functional areas across industry verticals. So over the next 1 hour, myself, Manish and Madhangi will share some thoughts, perspectives, understandings about this journey that we have taken ourselves, and I share some live experiences with you, which hopefully will enrich your knowledge and understanding and will sort of help in your career progression as well. In the introduction, I think, data is the new oil was the statement that was made, right? And I don't think, and there could have been a better description that could have been given to the current environment and ecosystem and the transformations and the changes that we are going through. Whether it is a little bit questionable, because this expression, data is oil, is now more than a decade old, right? As you will really know. We first heard this expression, data is the new oil. It was coined by Clive Humby, the man that built Clubcard, the world's first supermarket loyalty scheme. He was using this metaphor to explain how data is a resource that is useless if left unrefined. And only when it is mined and analyzed does it create potentially extraordinary value. So, incidentally, when Humby presented his proposal for a loyalty scheme to the directors of Tesco, and that was in the last century, way back in 1994, its chairman famously replied, and that's on record. And what he said was, the chairman, what scares me about this is that you meaning Humby, you know more about my customers after 3 months than what I know after 30 years, right? A very strong, compelling, telling statement. And the rest was history. The launch of Clubcard doubled Tesco's market share to become the UK's biggest supermarket chain. It was also arguably the world's first example of what's now known as the big data environment. So before I go to the other panelists to pick their brains and to get their perspectives and thoughts on what they think about data is the new oil or data is the oil of today's world. Let's talk about some similarities, some analogies versus some contrast between data and oil. So if you look at it pragmatically, data is an essential resource that powers the information economy, right? We are in the era of knowledge economy or information economy. So data as an essential resource powers the information economy in much the same way that oil has fueled the. Once upon a time, the wealthiest were those with most natural resources. Now it's a knowledge economy, so where the more data you have to a certain extent is proportional to the knowledge that you are being able to acquire. Can be extracted from data just as energy can be extracted from oil. Traditional oil powered the transportation era. In the same way, the data as the new oil, or as the oil analogy, is also powering the emerging transportation options like the driverless cars, Hyperloop, etc. And their examples galore. So from those standpoints, you can see a lot of similarity, analogy, and why data was oil as the new oil from and endorsed by the technocrats dealing with data and data related services, solutions, and offerings. So data flows like oil, but we must drill down into data to extract value from it. Data promises a plethora of new uses, right? You name it, diagnosis of disease, direction of traffic patterns, etc. We'll talk about some of these use cases and case studies during the course of our discussion. Just as oil has produced useful plastics, petrochemicals, lubricants, gasoline, and home heating. So you can see the analogy. But there are some contrasts as well. So oil is a scarce resource. Data isn't just abundant, especially now with the data that are getting generated by each and every individual through interactions and engagements, especially in the form of unstructured data. It's not only just abundant, it's a cumulative resource. Then the same cannot be used somewhere else because it's survival good. That's not true for data. This and the data can be used and reused, of course, with permissions, authorizations, etc., etc. The same data can be used elsewhere because it is a non-rival, and that's a very important distinction. As a tangible product, oil actually faces high friction, transportation, and storage costs. As an intangible product, data has much lower friction, transportation, and storage. That's absolutely intuitive, and it's it's a common knowledge. The is predominantly can be defined through the process of extraction, refining, and distribution. The life cycle of data, on the other hand, is defined by relationships. Its relationship with other data types, other data sources. That was the genesis and the birth of connected data, right? Where we are talking about soft connections or soft linkages through relational databases, and hard connections, where you're talking about more sophisticated nodes, vertices types of entities, graph database, etc., etc. But eventually it is driven by relationships with other data, with context, and with itself via different feedback. So I would also like to sort of go around the virtual table and get some thoughts and perspectives about this theme from our other panelists. Manish, may I start with you? And if you can share whether you endorse this viewpoint and what have been your experiences in your illustrious journey, if you can share some thoughts and perspectives.
Sir, a little suggestion. Dr. Chowdhury, can you please come into coverage? We are not able to see you.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Is that better? Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Bikramjit. First of all, thanks for to the committee and to the team that's really putting this whole initiative together. I think when we were at BIM, we used to miss it. Now I think the technology and the passion of these students have made it possible. So thanks a lot to Professor Entella and all the students who are kind of putting all the effort. Two, it's always pleasure to be back to your own alma mater, and I'm just simply loving it. It's great to see one of my batchmates being here, Dhagam Srinivas. Dhagam, thanks for being here. And Dr. Bikramjit, I think who am I to really endorse this particular thought that data is the new oil? I would not even say data is the new oil. Data is the oil is probably much more kind of apt phrase in my mind, having built my kind of career and earned my living out of two very big enablers of data transmission and data mining, which is software and telecoms. So I would say there is no doubt in my mind, and I would say all of us actually look at our daily lives, can see it everywhere, starting from getting up in the morning and deciding whether to go out for a walk. These days for me it's totally data driven decision, because NCR, where I'm based, is totally polluted. So every day morning I look at some of the data, whether it's polluted or not, and then decide. So look at how the lives has changed. But I would like to just put the perspectives from two different angles. One, I would say data is new oil, or data is oil, but we have to look at it from the perspective that it's really driving a new industrial revolution now. And some of you, I'll really encourage you to read the book called Student Spatially, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, which is purely driven mainly by the fact that we are going digital as much as possible for last 10-15 years. And while the first two or three industrial revolutions were fueled by the fact that mankind could find a way to convert water to steam and mechanical industrialization took place, the second one happened in 1870 around when the electricity was generated and we could find a way to produce at mass scale. The third one, which happened faster in 1970 when the IT came into kind of play, and we could automate all those mechanical processes and mass production facilities. But starting 2000 or 2005, the new economy is all about digital, and that's the industrial revolution. And why I'm sharing that is because these students, they somehow directly, indirectly will be impacted, and they will find the opportunities in this industrial revolution that's happening to really make an impact in their lives and to their societies. So, but as Dr. Bikramjit clearly said, it's not just about data, it's really about data leading to judgment of a human being and then that leading to a good decision making. And that's where my perspective comes, that data on its own doesn't mean anything, but it really quickens and hugely improves the decision making that we are doing as in every aspect of our life, in business, in personal life, and everywhere that we see these days. So, how many? I'm sure Dr. Bikramjit and Matangi, my co-panelists, would really relate to it. In 80s and 90s, there used to be a lot of challenges in the Indian election system when we used to talk about booth capturing, and that was a big problem. That was a menace. For last 10, 15 years, how many of us, especially the students who are there, have heard about this problem? It didn't get solved just by putting people to the police to the problem, just throwing them on that. It got solved because of decisions that could be made by the election commission based on the data. Actually, they found out which are the centers where this that problem is there. They found out how to really kind of using the operational research with data, how to really space it out so that the paramilitary forces could be deployed there. They found out through data who are those people who are the troublemakers and rounded them up much before the election. So if you look at it, that's what it enabled the election commission to do. That's how the one of the biggest menace of electioneering went away. Similarly, if you look at our daily life, as I gave an example of getting up in the morning and deciding to walk, it touches everybody's life these days in terms of a decision being made based on data being made available through technology. So whether it is about deciding which route to take from home to office, whether you're deciding which stock to buy, or whether you're deciding, hey, my car is giving the right mileage or not, it's all about data being available in a right structured and mind format, and we being able to leverage it. I won't take too much of time right now, but really the second part of this, my thinking is, one is about decision making, but I think data is now at the core of innovation. Any innovation that you see in your any walk of life is being driven by the data around it. Somebody really put effort to capture the data, make sense of it, and build an application around it one way or the other. And I'll talk about it a bit later too, but and more from tech side, coming from that Microsoft, having worked there, I'll touch upon this aspect at various point of time. The tech has made it really possible. Some of us who use Alexa, which is right now pretty much there in a lot of our homes, it wasn't that good earlier when we used to ask Alexa to do a couple of things for us. But over last 1 year, look at the improvement Alexa has made. It's only because Amazon or the technology service provider behind it captured the data, the dialects that we use in various parts of India, and use the AI and machine learning to really improve the outcome that Alexa chooses for us for each and every command of ours. So that's what data can do if really systemically and with an objective in mind, mined properly to really go ahead and solve a real life problem. But as managers, I think that's the last aspect of my thinking. It has its own challenges, but I leave the technical parts out. But really, as managers, we need to find a way to really make it refined and consumable. Number two, develop a culture in ourselves as well as in our organization, whether educational institutes or companies, to really develop the culture of making database decision making. I will not say that human gut and intuition won't have a place, but how to really marry it in a more cohesive manner. And then last, which all of us will do struggle every day, balancing the business need of speed with the perfection. So with that, I'll pause here, and I'm keen to really hear from my co-panelist Matangi also. But how many of us heard titles like Chief Digital Officer. I was surprised to see Chief Algorithm Officer as being the roles available in the market right now for professionals like you and professionals like us. So it's amazing what has happened in the last 5 years. I was just reading one or two, kind of facts. If we really collate all the data that's available, digital data that's available in world today, half of it was created in last 12 to 18 months. That means whatever data we created from 1969 till 2018, it got doubled in last 12 to 18 months. And I'm talking about digital data right now, not the non-digitized data. Every human being right now has, on an average, 7 connected devices which are generating data every day continuously. So look at the data that's being made available. And for every search that we do on Google, it uses compute power worth 1,000 computers to search through all the data that's available on the web and give you an answer, which is really about buying a shoes next door to the market that exists to your place. So having said that, I think for me, data is the oil, or rather data is much more than oil, is where I would rest my case. And I will hand it back to Dr. Bikramjit to take it forward.
Thank you very much, Manish. It was very, very cooperative. So thanks for your thoughts. Matangi, what would you add to already what have already been talked about? I'm sure if you of the experiences and your journey, professional journey in the space of data in different capacities, some of the additional dimensions and orthogonal dimensions that you can brought in, which can shed more light on this theme, data is the oil or the new oil.
Sure, Dr. Bikram. So, good morning, everyone. Glad to meet you on a Saturday morning. Happy to connect with young minds and share some of the ideas that I have. So, I want to look at this phrase a little differently, right? So, data is the new oil. It has two connotations in it, right? Oil kind of means that somebody who holds the oil, at one point was holding all the reserves and all the money in the world. But oil also meant it was depleting, right? So we should look at it from two perspectives. I will look at it from the first perspective, which is oil meant money, right? But oil, though, was a depletable resource, right? Is a depletable resource. Data is not, right? Manish talked about 7 connected devices. So the data is not going to stop. It's only going to grow, unlike oil. Right? So from that perspective, data, I think, is oil when it comes to the barrier it poses. And it is not oil when it comes to the depletability of things we are talking about. Now, with respect to barrier, right, let's just take a step back and think how easy it is to build a Google today, how easy it is to build a Facebook, how easy it would be to build, let's say, Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra. What do you think would be the biggest barrier, right? The biggest barrier is not the technology, right? You could produce a website, you could produce a search engine. Those are not the problems. The problem is these companies run out of data, right? The customization or the recommendation layers or the information retrieval and the algorithm behind it requires plenty of data to run things on. And to collect that data, it's going to be a lot of time and a lot of switch costs that a company has to incur for people to start adopting to a new website, right? Or a new search engine. So, which is why it is getting tougher and tougher to build, though it is technically easy to launch a website. With few clicks, you could launch a website. With few clicks, you could launch an app. But for an app to be successful or a website to be successful, it is not just about the software. It's about data. So data has become an extreme entry barrier, pretty much as oil reserves are. So it is. We could think of it like I don't know. A lot of times I think about this. That is there. Is there any area that Google has not touched on, right? So what started as a search engine, what went to location, went to maps, went to your assistants at home where you will ask things and it responds. if you want to search, you first hit Google and Google directs you to go to Amazon or Flipkart or anything. I don't think there is an area which is essentially possible today to build anything new which Google has not built or cannot build, right? And the biggest, and it is not because of Google, right? It is because of the advantage of the data that they have been constantly collecting over decades now. And that barrier is impossible to beat, right? Like it's a big barrier. I know companies are coming, they have to have significantly larger advantage than the earlier companies, right? So earlier people were, there is a retail store, physical retail store, okay, the next street you can start another retail store, right? So it's not like you will cannibalize so much that you cannot have any sales. But today, think about having another, let's say even retail website. It's not the toughness of the marketplace where you are sourcing from suppliers, selling it to customers is there. But even if that operations problem is solved, what cannot be solved, and any founder's nightmare today is app adoption or a website adoption. How are you going to make people go to a new website when already people are used to going to a previous website, right? So and why do people go to where they go, or why do people go to apps they go? Because they have downloaded it, their data is with that with that company. It becomes much easier to. So though the switching, it is it is not like switching into a new physical place. So this today's switch for the user is just downloading another app. Even then, it is not so easy to develop. It is not so easy to successfully build another app, another e-commerce app, or another search engine, fundamentally because of the personalization and the comfort that the data can provide. Right? So data is a huge entry barrier. And at some level, it kind of monopolizes the market also, right? So as governments are thinking about monopoly laws, data barrier is one thing I think people should start thinking about, because that's exactly what it is becoming. Few reserves, and people are starting to own that to a level that the other competitor cannot enter. So the earlier you have gotten into the race, the easier it is for you now. The more difficult it is for the new entrants to come in, simply because data has become a barrier. And from that perspective, in my opinion, data means that oil rush, that we had at one point in time. And it is also scary to think about it. It is also scary because your data is also no more private, right? Your one company literally knows, or maybe few companies, 2-3 companies knows everything about you than your parents or your spouse or your child knows about it, right? So the engine that I browse knows more about me than my spouse does, right? So and hence that also provides that power, right? So to break that power, to make a market economy in data is something that the future has to answer us. I don't want to sound it bleak, but this is reality today, and I do agree with the statement that data is the new oil from that perspective.
Great. Thank you so much, Matangi. And, we can keep on talking about this one theme forever because there is so much to talk about. But we have limited time. So what we will do is also switch a little bit of gear and move into another theme. And I will pick a thread from what sort of Manish mentioned in his perspectives about data is the new oil. He talked about the quality of decisions and whether guts or instinctive decisions still have a place, or whether it is purely data driven, or whether we can think of hybrid of all these, right? So from that standpoint, let's talk about a little bit about a theme, a concept, and which originated more as a statement and an articulation from Dan Zarela. He was an award-winning social media scientist and author of the bestseller, The Science of Marketing. So what he said was, marketing without data is like driving with your eyes closed, right? So, and that's a telling statement. And if we look into the history of how the evolution of marketing, the importance of that statement also becomes clear. So in those early days, when there was hardly sort of credible, clean, usable, actionable data that was available, marketers were forced to rely more on gut feeling when it came to assessing the success of marketing initiatives. So they simply lacked the tools and information needed to scientifically conceive of and measure the effectiveness of their efforts, all the marketing efforts and campaigns and all that. So even as more effective data analytics tools started to become available, that's the journey. Prefer to trust intuition over data, and that's the paradox. And we have experienced this ourselves. I personally have seen that over the last 25 years, how interestingly the revolution and the evolution have happened. That many marketers prefer to trust intuition over the data, even when the effective data analytics tools were available. And to the extent that intuition became prized in the C-suite. It was being looked at as an asset, as a quality. And taking action based on gut feeling was valued over the hard work of crunching data and formulating rational strategies. Sitting in today's world, for some of you, it may appear not only paradoxical but strange, but that's the evolution had happened. So at the beginning of this century, as recently as 2002, this executive search firm, Christian and Timbers, found that 45% of executives rely more on instinct than facts and figures to run their business. And this is according to a Harvard Business Review report. So it is highly credible information. And that's a pretty alarming statistic, right? Unfortunately, for marketers driven by creative instinct, quote unquote, today's businesses are increasingly demanding returns of investment as a tangible key performance indicator for marketing efforts. So marketers simply have to do better and have to do better going forward. And your gut feeling isn't just good enough anymore, only as the sole vehicle for decision making. So what does this mean? This means a transition from art as marketing was actually professed and advocated, that's an art form, to science. Now, I think it is still partly art, partly science, but science component has to be a very, very important component in the decision making as far as marketing initiatives are concerned. So it's understood that marketers didn't always have data analytics tools available to them to enable them to quantitatively measure the effectiveness of their campaigns. So in the past, hence, determining marketing success was primarily an intuitive exercise. And now I will give another quote which sort of exemplifies the importance of bringing science and hardcore science into the art of decision making as was done earlier. So John Wanamaker, he's a 19th century merchant and he's an early marketing pioneer. So obviously in the marketing space, he's a household name. He once famously explained, what he said was, I know half my advertising is wasted. The trouble is, I don't know which half. So very telling, right? So despite a growing and acute recognition of the need for more transparency, the technology just wasn't there to really help people who understood that half of their advertising is wasted, but they didn't really know which one, right? So the differentiation and discrimination of good initiatives, good campaigns, right campaigns, personalization, hyper-personalization, as we see in today's world, right? So the march towards practical marketing analytics surged ahead in the 1980s with the development of what was known at that point of time in marketing as productivity analysis. So this was followed by enterprise marketing analysis systems in the early 2000s, at the beginning of this century, that give larger companies. And again, going back to the point that Matangi was making. So the larger companies always have a little bit of, undue advantage, and that's the practicality of life. So this gives larger companies the capability to better track their marketing efforts, not so much the relatively smaller ones. And then business intelligence followed soon afterward, coming together as a coherent discipline. And that paved the way for modern data analytics as we see, powered now by bleeding edge cloud technology, predictive modeling, information APIs, you name it, right? But perhaps the biggest leap since then, during this transformation and transition, was the democratization of data analytics within the last few years. What we see today, what we are seeing today is we're witnessing a dramatic shift in the data analytics tools, which are becoming increasingly accessible to marketers from businesses of every type and size. And the price of these tools are dropping. They're highly affordable. Cloud solutions are enabling mobility. The drag and drop interface that used to be so popular even in the beginning of this century are getting replaced more by code-based. So are replacing the code-based ones. And when we're talking about code, we are talking about light codes, right? And automation and AI are handling the heavy lifting, and integrations are bringing the silos down. So hence the central question is no longer whether marketers can apply the scientific method to available data. Rather, the question is now how best you do this, right? So it is not about whether, it is about how best. So one of the recent Salesforce report points out that business leaders face a continued influx of data, and it will be the situation, and still struggle to make sense of it all. That's where how best the question comes into play. And that's where marketing as an amalgamation of art and science will have to further move forward with data-driven decision making. So from this standpoint, I would go back to Matangi and will pick her brains on what she thinks, based on her experience, how has marketing evolved, and whether in today's world, marketing without data is indeed like driving with your eyes closed.
Thanks, Dr. Vikram. I think it's a very interesting quote. Marketing without data is driving without eyes closed. Before I begin, a small thing about driving with our eyes closed. Today, self-driving cars are there, so you could drive with your eyes closed. So I think it was said before the era of self-driving cars. But that apart, in fact, driving itself is taken over by data. That's what I want to say. So now on marketing, right? See, I see data science in this way, right? Like when automations happened around possibly starting from the 70s onwards, when normal automation started happening, right? Your manufacturing processes, your CRM processes, and things like ticketing systems and all that stuff. What has happened was there was a manual process, and machines were kind of automating a manual process. Right? And then that had its own journey, and that was the IT boom in India and things like that. Now, what data and decisioning through data does is kind of automating the decisioning that was happening in organizations, right? So from automating processes to automating thinking is what we have come to, right? And it is reality, right? And we see this all across. We may not so much realize it. For example, when we do a GPS thing, we don't know we may think, okay, what is the thinking here? It is still, there is enough machine learning in this. It is kind of giving you a direction, etc. But where is the thinking involved in it? But let's zoom into some of the other processes. Let's take risk decisions that happen in banks, for example. Whom to give a loan to, whom to not give a loan is pretty much run across machines everywhere. the interest rates, the pricing decisions in some of the large banks of what is the rate that to be given to what kind of customer is driven by data, right? It's driven by data without human intervention. So gone are the days where somebody used to take your your credit statement, look at it, your bank balance and your history manually, and then decide whether you should be given a loan or not, and then assign a interest rate, right? So those are very historic processes. So what has happened, a group of people who are very good at knowing whether to give a credit or not have kind of moved to decisioning, their decisioning and their power of thinking, the way they used to do things, have got automated by machines, right? This may be an example outside marketing, but let's look at marketing next, right? Marketing where you are figuring out your product market fit, or you're figuring out where who are your target audience, or you're figuring out your positioning or where to sell, etc. In lot of at least the digitally savvy, digital first companies, a lot of them is taken over. What are your recommendation systems? Like, for example, like right now, I think all of us are consuming content digitally, even for entertainment, right? For example, Netflix or Amazon Prime or Sony Live or anything like that. So imagine if somebody had to manually look at and then play programming on that. To what the machines do. There are large scale algorithms that is running out there, which is kind of understanding your preferences, which is matching your preference to those those people who have been there, and then it shows you what you need, right? In fact, the definitions of marketing itself has changed quite a lot once data started occupying center stage, right? We are now talking about one-to-one personalization. Gone are the days where you are doing segmentation, and for this segmentation, we would, provide this kind of an experience. So there are only 4 types of experience that can be provided, or 4 types of products that can be provided. But today it is about just one-to-one, right? And even take the case of search engine, where you may really think personalization is not possible, but tons of personalization goes there. Whether you are browsing for what to eat or what to cook, it depends on it not only depends on what you type, but it depends on what kind of a person you are, what you have done, what kind of history you have carried, right? So the world of marketing can no longer stay away from the world of personalization, which is kind of only driven by data. Right. From a point in time where there was, there is only one car, as and the color of the car is black, right? From that point, we have moved to an era of a person-to-person personalization. Person-to-person, your recommendation changes in Netflix, for example. Even the posters and banners changes based on what your preferences are. And like I said, like your interest rate, which is a very important pricing component, that changes. We all know whenever we have taken a cab, two people trying to book the cab from the same point do get different prices, and they do get different prices because their demand and their price sensitivity is very different, and their need is different as compared to each other. So there is a price that it plays in terms of product. Data plays a role. And promotions are run at such a large scale today that algorithms are kind of designing what promotions to give. Algorithms are also saying what kind of users we should provide promotions to, because not everybody needs a promotion to buy a product, and it is saving marketers tons of money by choosing the people who need the promotion to buy a product, right? And these are happening right around us as we interact with the website or with an app, or we talk to Alexa or OK Google or anything. These are happening right behind the scenes without us knowing, and that's a great point of a technology, right? Like when you don't even realize what is happening behind it. So all these personalizations, which has become the essential center stage of marketing, is happening right in front of our eyes and without us even recognizing. So though as much as some marketers may say that we know our customers better, etc., but the data and the algorithms could know them much better than any human being can perceive, and that's the reality. And companies which are going to adopt their marketing strategies around data is going to come out victoriously, and we could see those examples of such consumer facing companies all around us. So I would like to see this statement as the starting point of personalization, and this is something ubiquitous, and it's kind of always around us. We don't even know that we are getting targeted. We don't even know that something has got recommended for us which we did not look at. But all through the things, these marketing campaigns or these personalization campaigns are happening.
Great. Thank you, Madangi. I think that's very elaborate and very nicely articulated and explained. So, Manish, what will be your thoughts on this theme?
So fortunately, unfortunately, I've never worked in marketing so much, but I've done 20 years of my life sales. And let me just, kind of bring this whole discussion to ground level of a salesman. And I'll share just one or two examples of my own experience, which I think, I hope the audience can relate to. And two of the biggest challenges when I took over as CEO of the India public sector at Microsoft, two biggest challenges that I had was how do I forecast my sales? Because Microsoft being data driven, they would love to have, to the maximum third decimal point correct sales forecast. And think of a $130 million company. If they don't get it right, they don't get it right with NASDAQ, and they don't get right with the shareholders. So initially I couldn't understand, but the second problem was doing it with the government, because government, as you know, the projects could really delay, invariably and inordinately. So I did not know how to forecast it, to be very frank. Not that I did not know, nobody knew, but all of us were trying, hitting and trying. Sometimes you'll get it right and you'll say, yeah, I've done it. And sometimes when you don't get it, you will blame it on the market or on something else and say, I didn't get it right. So one of the biggest challenges that I had was, how do I forecast a deal worth $10 million or 50K? When is it coming? And that's the challenge with all the salespeople, guys. The people who have done it, they know it. And the people who are going to get into sales, let me tell you, if you get your sales forecast, you've got your manager, you've got your CEO on your side, you got your customer on your side. Let me put it that way. So I was struggling with that, and it was said that this role that you're taken over is a landmine. You're going to go there, and within 6 months you will leave, or you will be shunted out because your forecast will not be right. So every month, every week, I'll go and do that. The only way I could crack it, and not fully, the only way I could crack it is by using the data that was available for last 7 years, quarter on quarter, deal by deal, customer by customer. And I projected something as my forecast, but I just requested one of my, ops team guys to run it through the machine learning. And that was like 2017. And I was pleasantly surprised that his forecast, I was unpleasant, let's put that. It was hard to, kind of take it, but pleasantly surprised later on, because I could use the technology, that his forecast, the machine learning forecast, was better than mine. And it's a simple application of data, but I think, as Matangi and Dr. Bikramjit also, kind of alluded to, it's not just about data. It's about crunching it with all the variables, known, unknown at times, and coming to the decision or business judgment. The forecast quarter on quarter was much better than what I could do. And the simple reason for that was, as a human being, I could not look at all the variables for last 7 years, what the system could look at, what a machine could look at. I'm not professing machine learning as the only solution. All I'm saying is data with right decision-making variables, structured properly, presented properly, could really solve a simple sales problem, which me and my predecessors were struggling with. So that's all what I would say. And the other part was, how do you really sell it? How do you really make people believe that, hey, I'm not going to take your forecast from a salesman or a sales director or a sales manager. You give me a forecast, but I'm not going to take it. It's a big challenge. till the time you prove it that you're right with the data, they are not going to take it. But there's an element of culture to drive when you talk about taking decisions based on data. And I'll just wrap it up by telling you a simple, kind of hard measure that I had to take. If somebody came to the forecast meeting without kind of looking at the data how he has performed, I just did not go ahead with the meeting. I said, let's come back with data instead of wasting half an hour of you and mine. Let's come back once you are ready and I'm ready with it. And if I was not ready, I also opted out of it. So simple measure, cultural discussion, cultural aspect of it, we can't forget, because all that data is useless till people are willing to believe in it and execute on it. I'll park my thought here in the interest of time, Dr. Vikramjit.
Yeah, thank you very much, Munesh. I think very insightful. And just to talk about your forecasting initiative, I'm sure many of us are aware of this famous assertion, right? All some of them are useful. So I think that's fundamental something that needs to be really kept in mind. What it really says is that the assumptions that go behind all the models and the algorithms and their ensembles and their hybrids, right, everything, those assumptions keep changing. And hence, because we are in a real life scenario, so unless and until we are being able to incorporate those assumptions and calibrate them in our ensemble of algorithms, the models continue to become wrong. So that's why when you move from a sort of a test environment to actual production environment or life environment, you see so many high quality algorithms failing, and one needs to be cognizant of that. That lab environment success doesn't guarantee you success in real life, right? So very, very nicely articulated. So we have limited time. So what we will do is we'll change a little bit of gear and talk about maybe perhaps some of the career progression opportunities for people who would like to pursue in the data space. And some of the roles, some of the types of responsibilities people can take in the space of data, and the way it has sort of expanded and proliferated. There are various types of roles, and those roles are sometimes overlapping, sometimes they can be distinguished one from the other. So, Matangi, based on all your experiences throughout your journey in the data space, would you like to give some suggestions, recommendations on people who would like to sort of traverse the data space, whether as a scientist or as an engineer or as an architect? What will be your advice, and what sort of roles would you say are going to become increasingly demanding in the coming days?
Yeah, so maybe I would answer this question through your data science life cycle, right? Like any data solution that we put starts by collecting data, and then there is a data pipeline, then there is some analysis, then in cases where it is required, there is predictive solution, and then that gets deployed, and then there is finally reporting and things like that to analyze the results, right? Roughly put, that would be the different stages of a data science solution, which kind of manifests into different roles. One set of people are called data engineers, who are kind of responsible for instrumenting data and storing them for downstream systems to consume it, right? So these are people who are collecting data from the logs in case of real-time large-scale machines, or these are people who are working with some databases, etc. Then they are putting it in big data or any other large data source. They may be either putting it in large data source, or they could be also putting it on real-time stores where machines operating at fairly large throughput and low latencies could access these logs. So this is the job of a data engineer, to make data available for downstream consumption of analysis or predictive modeling or anything, or to make data kind of available for other decisioning systems at real time to be useful. At real time, you can't query a big database because it has its own latency problems. So that would be your data engineer kind of role. followed by your business analyst or a product analyst, as people are called, who are people who are going to consume this data. Either make reports or dashboards out of it for others to make meaningful insights. Right? These are roles which are very focused on building some reporting, building some BI tools, etc., so that others could make decisions on top of it. Then there are other professions which largely comes under analytics, where people can look at the data, make decisions, make recommendations looking at point in time data, or come up with some trends or patterns, or monitor certain signals and alert the organization about it, or analyze when sales are not doing well, or when your losses are increasing, or let's say the company wants to launch a new product or take the product to the new market. We want to find out more estimates and things like that. Hardcore analysis, estimates, and statistics would come under the role of analytics. So we have seen 3 roles now. One is on data engineering. Another, we saw it on product analyst or a data analyst kind of a role. The third one is the business analyst role or analytics consultant. Those are the titles people regularly go by. Followed by your data scientist. Data scientist is people who consume these large-scale data, build predictive models, understand core amount of mathematics, have some knowledge and practice on computer science. They know to build algorithmic solutions for problems, and they also can know some level of taking their models or taking their predictive solutions live, right, or predictive solutions into production. So that would be the classic data scientist, where there is a lot of buzz about, right? Followed by somebody called as machine learning engineer. That role is also becoming very prominent in the industry. These are people who consume these models or predictor solution and are able to productionize for large scale decisioning, right? So maybe there are million API calls, and they know how to kind of manage this. They know how to be able to run, let's say, a large scale neural network model real time, or they can maintain latency. They can make these systems talk to other systems, and make things very compatible, right? So that would be your machine learning engineering. Other than this, also, there are other profiles, little bit more generic than this. For example, people who work on digital analytics, right, which is about analyzing website performance, running A/B experiments on website, working with designers to run those, making sure their metric would be to increase the sales and increase the making sure the traffic doesn't drop out and things like that. Digital analytics, ads, right? There are a bunch of specialist roles that is also opening up on digital ads, how to optimize the ads, people who optimize ads, people who specialize in, building the engineering of the ad systems, etc. Completely on the generic role, we also have product managers for data who kind of help build, data scientists and the data teams a sustainable product that the company can, the larger organization can benefit. The last one would be, there is another role that's increasingly coming called data program managers, who are kind of taking some of the data solutions that the data science organization is building across the to different users, different business users and product users within the company, or if they could be program managers who understand inherently a lot of data and take it to clients, etc. So that would be the variety of career paths that I know of in this field.
Yeah, I think that's very comprehensive, and really thank you for that, and the way you articulated and explained the smaller nuances of the job descriptions across the entire spectrum, almost from data scientists to all the way to data analysts, with the machine learning engineers, product managers, business analysts all coming into play. So I will just add to that, and I'm sure all of us who are in the data space and even the budding students who are cultivating their thoughts to be in the data space, they are aware of this statement, right? data scientist, the sexiest job of the 21st century. And this was made by Thomas Davenport and DJ Patel. DJ Patel was the chief data scientist at the White House till very recently. So Davenport and Patel has, they really, that was their vision, and that's what they thought, that it is indeed the sexiest job, the data scientist job, the most coveted job, the most elusive job. And when we are talking about data science, we are talking about three different components, right? We are talking about domain knowledge. We are talking about high quality understanding of disciplines like statistics, like mathematics, like physics, and all that, right? And to a certain extent, even economics as well, especially the microeconomics part. And obviously, you will need to have huge strength in terms of being able to compute. That is, you should be a very good assimilator of different languages, should be able to write codes well, right? So it's sort of a combination that you're looking for, which is almost elusive. That's what they were sort of leading towards. And we are talking about unicorn, right? And hence it's the sexiest job. When you build a team, of course, you do not look for unicorn, then you can't build a team. So you hire people with, let's say, stats, maths, etc. background. You hire people with programming background, people with domain knowledge in, let's say, banks, financial services, insurance, telecom, manufacturing, and then cross-pollinate. That's how you build your team. And then allow each other to learn from their others' expertise and become more complete. If you're looking for a complete individual from the outset, then you may not necessarily be in a position, and you will just keep waiting for the unicorn to pop up, which is very impractical. So I think we have very little time left, but just maybe 2-3 minutes of, let's say, final thoughts with respect to some interesting applications or use cases in the data space that we have come across. I'm sure we have already been talking about it in different ways through when we are elaborating and sharing our perspectives, but maybe something that we found very interesting or more cutting edge, or something that is going to revolutionize the way we approach the data space and how it's impacting our life in a sort of very phenomenal way. Manish, would you like to share a use case or an application area?
No, thank you, Dr. Bikramjit. I think, as I said, it's touching us everywhere. And I will always, talk about data with technology, because those go together to really leverage it now. Having kind of worked in the government sector, I think all of us are already benefiting from data and decision being led by the data. I would just like to, kind of touch base on one or two aspects that are not so visible to us, because we are probably more fortunate people that we have the access to technology. We are all having the, best of the education possible. We are the fortunate lot, is what I would say. But I really want to talk about and table one or two cases where I was really party to, kind of that development, which is really about less, kind of visible public that we don't see so much. If you talk about agriculture, or you talk about, a big strata of our society, like the blind people, right? You will be surprised. There are more than 5 crore blind people in India itself, which is a big, kind of what you call segment. And technology and leveraging the data, what it could make the difference to these two people is, I'll just briefly talk about. Number one, all of us are aware of IMD, the Meteorological Department of India, and all of us look at it 6 years back, 5 years back. We never believed, what they said. It was actually said, if they say that it's going to rain, it's not going to rain. But you'll be surprised with the right policy and a lot of private players joining that bandwagon or that particular industry. Now there are applications that are being enabled by private sector and leveraged by government very well, I would say, to really help the farmers decide when should they sow the seed so that they can get the best harvest. Because there are so many, factors around it. The weather, the soil, the, kind of the timing, the humidity, the rains, expected rains. So there are like a lot of organizations, whether it's SkyMed, BKC, that I'm not a spokesman for them. I'm just giving an example that they are enabling these farmers, and they're not providing them PDAs or smartphones to get it enabled. They've leveraged the technology to provide them the update through SMS facility. Hey, this is the now time for you to go and sow. Think of the impact that it could make to a farmer who earns lakh rupees or 2 lakh rupees and is always subject to the vagaries of the weather. I think it's all enabled by the data scientists working at ICMR and with great policy developed by the government of India and through technology. Second example, I would say 5.5 crore people blind, but when people looked at the data, LV Prasad Institute, they're doing great work over there, and they're saying if these people had been attended early on, based on the data analysis that they did about all these 5.5 crore people, or those who are kind of getting operated in their centers, not 5.5 crore people, sorry about that, but they come out with a conclusion that if it was attended early on, these 80% of these could have been avoided. Think of it, 5.5 crore people. Out of that, 4 crore probably could have been avoided had it been predicted much more earlier. So they're using it for predictive analysis, and they're tied up with a lot of global organizations to just help kids with the data early on through the PSCs that the government of India is working right now to say, hey, this kid is kind of is more prone to having an eye disease or a blindness later on in his life. Whether you have to supplement with the food, proper food, or some exercise or something else, simple intervention. I would say that's a real impact of a technology and a data being used as a great life leveler for these people. I think I'll pause here. We are already over time, but all of us are benefiting from it. I think the impact of data is just starting to happen. I would say I was reading only 1% of world data is being analyzed today. So we've just touched the tip of the iceberg. With all these young minds and so much of technology available, I have no doubt that the future is bright, and we can have a larger impact on the society as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manish. Thanks a lot. I think that's very informative. Matangi, just maybe a couple of thoughts and ideas, especially on the search space where you have that strength and competence, and those applications could be very insightful for the audience. You are on mute, Matangi. You are on mute.
Sorry, thanks. So there are plenty of use cases of NLP, right? Natural language. And NLP itself has its base in the 1950s when people were trying to interact with machines more naturally than, programming and writing large lines of codes. So NLP originated it from there, and then from there when search engines came, and then people wanted to search large scale documents, they started writing natural queries, right? So search also has some level of history to share with the natural language, the progress in NLP itself, right? And from there, the searches have grown. One, it's very natural. In two ways, it has grown, right? One, search engines can take natural language queries, right? You can write large questions. And it also is personalized, right? There are two different things. One is I can write a large sentence and I can expect the search engine to kind of, understand it. Or let us say I can speak a long sentence to Alexa or to Google, okay, Google, or to Siri and expect that to understand it. That's one way it has grown. The other angle also that it has grown, and this is in the last 4 or 5 years, is the application of user customization, right? Personalization of search. So if I type Apple and someone else types Apple, depending on the context of whatever her history I have done. The results change based on possibly my location and possibly my history with whatever I have searched earlier. Possibly I want to show the image of Apple to a 2-year-old kid, and hence I'm searching Apple, in which case as a user my expectation is to see an image of Apple right there. But some cases it may be that I want to understand about the company Apple, and I'm working, and during my work hours when I search Apple, I don't want to see about the Apple company as the top result, right? So that is how search engines are thinking today about how do they render the results to the user? How do we contextualize what the user want? Earlier, at least 10 years back, people were saying, how do I understand question, right? So this is a very classic example of search. Like in an e-commerce site, people, when the movie Frozen was released, right? People typed Frozen, right? And a lot of frozen goods and things like that came in, and the e-commerce website lost money because of it. But actually what people meant was Frozen movie, which kind of had launched around that time. So companies are trying to become more and more sensitive to personalize the user based on the context, based on the user context, based on the environment context, and also based on what the user searches, right? And that's how we are thinking about search today. We are not thinking what should I write so that the computer understands, right? We are thinking we are writing what we are thinking without even applying a filter. And that's a great milestone for a technology to achieve. Yeah, with that note, I would like to conclude my use case on search and recommendation.
I think it has been a great session. I really thank you, Madangi and Manish, for very elaborative and comprehensive articulation of each of the points. I think we can now open it up for Q&A. We hardly have maybe 10 minutes left. So Sharil, back to you. Would you like to coordinate the Q&A?
Sure, sir. Thank you, ma'am, and thank you, sir. You threw out light on so much aspects of data and decision making. So we are flooded with questions in the chat box. So I'll read it out if it is fine with all of you. So this is a question from Steffi. She says, with everything depending on data, platforms using the data to influence and even change the consumer behavior. What is your stand on ethical usage of these data?
Okay. Yeah, Manish, would you like to take it?
Well, I'll share my perspective as a user and a reader of this challenge. And here's what I think. I don't think if you really help the customer or the consumer really explore the stratum of opportunities in front of him to really choose one of them. But I think your question itself has the answer. If it is really a challenge of somebody wrongly trying to change the behavior to sell only, is not the right behavior. But the point is, how do you really regulate it? What is ethical and unethical? I think this space is going to change a lot, or going to see a lot of evolution. Personally, as I shared my couple of examples earlier, while data privacy is definitely important to me, and I really, kind of as a learned user will really value my own data privacy. But when I look at the potential that this data utilization or data analysis can be, kind of used to uplift the unknown India, the India that we don't know, I am all for, exploiting it till the time it starts hurting much more. I look at it as a businessman trade-off between the benefit versus the loss. But of course, if it is really a challenge where somebody is really being, kind of peddled something wrongly and just for wrongful gains by a commercial organization, obviously there has to be a mechanism to regulate it. But I think, in nutshell, I believe we are a bit far from there in India, because I see more benefit out of it than the loss.
Great. Matangi, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. So, see, as data is creating new industries, and a new type of consumer behavior, creating new entry barriers. So, but it's certainly we are at the point in time where data privacy is also kind of taken seriously, and governments or the right bodies of law should make the right governance rules. And as the governance rules also kind of become evident, it creates a very safe environment for consumers and the businesses to interact. It also provides guidelines for businesses so that everybody knows what to expect, and people are generally the sudden fear of sharing data, etc., will go, and data-driven companies will see the best out of it. From an organization perspective, also there are a lot of initiatives and things being taken. Chief information officers are very common in large organizations, whose one of their jobs is to make sure that consumers' interests are protected and the data gets used in the right way, right kind of encryption mechanisms, etc., are in place. But we are also going to see, I think, quite a bit of governance around this. Data privacy will become a main theme for a lot of governments to take up and regulate, and a regulated market will make for easy business transactions to happen. And yeah, that's something that it is going to get better and better at.
Yeah, I would just like to add that the whole fuzzy area is about how you define what is ethical versus what is fair. As being able to objectively create that line of demarcation. In certain situations, it is very clear. But some of these areas where you are trying to influence the behavior or wrongfully trying to change the behavior, clear, right? It can be claimed, it can be real intent. How do you draw that, and how do you really move, sort of eradicate the fuzziness? So, in certain situations, clear, non-ethical, a proper decision can be taken. In fuzzy areas, more work needs to go. And also, we need to keep in mind that influencing consumers' mind is not so easy as is being possibly portrayed. Most of the decision makings are not based on rational behavior. If there's a lot of irrationality that's involved in the decision making. The real paradox is we take our decisions first through irrational behavior and then try to rationalize it rather than rational driving decision making. So it is easier said than done to say that I will create an environment or a data system or create influence decision making in a way that will influence my business. Efforts are on. Yeah, it's so easy.
Thank you, sir. We have a next question from Mr. Abhijit. It is a statement followed by the question. So he says, I work in the marketing field with the abundance of data available. It is now possible for marketers to run heavily personalized campaigns and save hundreds and thousands of marketing dollars by targeting the right audience. So his question is, here is that, is this targeted advertising beneficial to the consumers, or are the marketers exploiting the data?
Privacy and its impact, and how do we sort of strike a balance between not really getting into an individual's privacy, but still being able to garner enough knowledge and information to have even hyper personalization. So perhaps maybe you can just elaborate a little bit more on that to answer this question.
Sure, Dr. Vikram. So I see the question here on the chat. It says, is the targeting advertising beneficial to customers or marketers exploiting data? See, these are market economies, right? If finally the targeted advertising is not beneficial to the users will quickly uninstall the app or not go to the website. So it has to be balanced. But having said that, I know there are websites, as soon as you go, there are tons of ads attacking you. I only wish the ad targeting is done better. But by principle, that's what these are doing. The idea is to show you relevance of the ad, right? So one of the guardrails that we think whenever we are talking about ads is the guardrail of relevance to the user. So you don't want to bombard the user with an absolutely irrelevant content in the objective of gaining money, because long term you would lose users, right? And hence users come first in a lot of organizations, and there are enough guardrails as we operate on the ads. So it's a balance between that. It's balance between giving the right user experience, but also kind of little bit becoming profitable for the business. But having said that, if it is going to be exploiting the data and not being very useful to the users, then the algorithm is failing in its objective, and that should be shot down. And that's how that's how objectives are set. That's how campaign rollouts happen in organizations. So it kind of internally takes care of it. That's how I do answer it.
Okay. Yeah, Manish, would you like?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. So, Shail, we can move to the next question.
Yes, sir. This is a question from Mr. Harish. His question is that with velocity and the volume with which the data is flowing, are the existing governance mechanism with organizations equipped to handle this?
Good question. Again, I will turn to Matangi first.
Yeah, so this is a tough question also. I don't think, having worked with a few startups in India, right? There are audits and there are whatever governance are established, they are being followed. But are they enough? May not be fully well, because all the governance across and how we are going to establish certain practices is something that is still under development, from the government of India, right? So till we legalize, till we kind of, completely complete the governance mechanism that needs to be followed by organization, there are going to be gaps in the short run. But I think in the long run, a lot of use cases where there could be a data breach could be overcome, but we keep hearing about data breaches even from very mature markets like the US. So this is going to be a a catch-up game, right? It's like with any fraudulent practices. Once the culprit kind of does the job, there are going to be governance established against it. So we will never be 100% complete on that. There can never be a situation where a breach cannot happen. But as long as we catch up with it, as long as the market and the policies kind of learn from data breaches and make it more better for users to live. And I would also agree with Munish on that. Like, at this point in time, we want data to be explored and made it beneficial for the user. Over a period of time, I think things will get all right, but there will never be a point in time where we can protect against data breaches, because it is a catch-up game that you will play with people who are going to hack the systems.
And if I can add, Dr. Bitanji, to what Matangi said, it's a process. It's a process. If you think about Indian Constitution, it's still getting rewritten, right? Amendments are being passed. So I would say that we are yet to write the Constitution of India when it comes to data, privacy and all. I think government is doing a great job over there trying to do it. It's not easy. And if it was so easy, we will not be talking about Dr. Bhimrao Ambedkar when it comes to Constitution of India. But more important, as Matangi said, as long as we are incorporating the learnings and understanding that we got to be honest about these kind of challenges, I think it will solve the problem in the long run for the greater good of the society.
Yeah, absolutely. And the key point here is the sensitization is very much there. The need for governance and making sure that privacy is respected, data leakage doesn't happen. Those, I think from an Indian standpoint, they're very much there. But as Matangi and Manish said, it is a catch-up game. Like the way the fraudsters, some of the best brains are working in that space of fraud, right? And by the time you are being able to sort of negate their impact, they come with something ingenious and take you completely by surprise. So it is going to be challenging. But intent-wise, yeah, we are getting there. Back to you, Sharil.
Sir, we have another question from Mr. Rahul Siddharth. His question is that moving from globalization to localization, vernacular languages will play a key role in reaching the larger audience of our country. How can this be incorporated towards social welfare?
Let me look into the chat. Can you repeat the question, please, once more?
Sure, sir. Moving from globalization to localization, vernacular languages will play a key role in reaching the larger audience of our country.
Okay.
How can this be incorporated towards social welfare?
Okay. So again, Madangi, if you would like to provide a standpoint, what would be your thought?
So we are seeing this, so this movement towards vernacular languages, user experience, for example. These are some of my observations. I don't have a academic proof to establish it, but then people in India, for example, their digital adoption is very different from the countries in West. For one, we know West adopted computers first and then the mobile phones. But we know we skipped the complete PC computer revolution. We directly went into mobiles. And the same is the case, right? You take any adoption. For example, WhatsApp voice messages are very common in India. I don't think that's the statistics in the Western countries, right? The reason I'm saying this is it's not only about language; it is also about user behavior being very different for in the Indian market as compared to other markets. The other big challenge in India is what is there in the question, which is the multiple languages which have very different scripts also, right? It's not like the European languages, which most of them share the same script and only the dialect is different. So the script is different, and as well as the way what you speak is different. And hence it gets tougher for an app company or a service provider in India to start adopting to vernacular languages. But these are, as far as I know, a lot of these companies, as you expand to larger base in India, becomes a must, right? So you will have to provide a service in Hindi or Tamil or Telugu or anything in order for people to start, browsing the app and making the benefit out of the app. So there is a move towards vernacularization. There is a move towards localization from that perspective, and also building a user experience which is very India centric. Some of the user experience, I'm not an expert in user experience, but some of the studies in user experience are again focused with a lot of research from the Western markets. These also needs to be substituted with the local flavor of how people start using apps and consume digital content. I think we are there, given the large penetration of the digital medium here. It is there, but still, it's a tough one to crack, right? Especially, let's say, for example, Alexa to interact with English and Alexa to interact, let's say, with in Tamil or in any South Indian language, or take a not so popularly spoken language like Tulu and all that stuff, right? It's not easy for the voice assistants to start working like that, simply because you don't have huge corpus. A lot of corpus in the internet today are still in English, right? And that's not what people speak most commonly in India. So I think there is a journey there, and it is going to get that is a tougher journey to crack. Cracking to the English-speaking audience in India is still easier, but cracking to the masses, talking it to them in their own languages, building a user experience which is very desi is going to be tough, and that's where possibly the next level of gold is.
Yeah, very true. And some of the largest companies in India, when they are dealing with call centers, the biggest challenge is from voice to text, the conversions when you're talking about local dialects, right? So even the algorithms and the ensembles are not necessarily being able to deal with that sort of a problem. It is not only about the dialect of the language, there is pronunciation involved, there is emotion involved, there is what is unsaid that is involved, right?
That's true.
Too many factors and unknowns that need to go behind converting, let's say, a voice to a sort of proper narration or a text. So it is a real strong quality scientific pursuit that is at this moment happening, but it's not going to be solved very, very easily. That's for sure. So it will continue to be a journey, and there will be learnings in the way, there will be mistakes that will be made, but it's certainly going to be an interesting journey for sure.
Correct.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think we are almost out of time, so yeah.
Yeah, so we'll wrap up with one more question. This is from Mr. Suresh Kumar. The question is, could you please narrate any single or well-known anecdotes to back the efficacy of this cross-pollination strategy? Is it more of a business need or more of an employability sustainability need?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I didn't understand the question. What is the cross-pollination strategy? I didn't understand.
Am I clear, ma'am? Is my voice clear?
Yeah, it is correct.
Your voice is breaking, but I don't think it's just the issue of the voice. It's not really clear what's the question. What exactly is the ask?
Okay, I'll read the question again.
No, the question is not clear, Cheryl. I'm not at least able to follow the question.
Okay, sure. So we'll wrap up with then the question of Tapar Bhatha. So the question says, can you please share some insights on data governance with respect to smart city transportation? Who owns the data and who governs it? In case of data-based decision-making, like in automotive vehicles, meeting an accident, who should the car save, the owner inside it or the person on the street?
Good question. We can only share our perspectives, but it cannot be a prescription because it is a debate that is going on in a much larger forum.
Yeah.
So, Matangi, your viewpoint?
Yeah, so smart city, I'm not aware of it because I don't know the internal of the project of smart city transportation, who owns the data and who governs it. And hence I don't know the answer to that question. Now the second part, which is an interesting question, I know this has been spoken about, who should it save? Is it the owner or the person on the street? I think there will be some laws around it, and this is a question for the lawmakers to answer and make it part of the audit in the program, of self-driving cars. And it can be audited. Whichever law you can make, you can still be audited. But now to make the law and make an ethical answer to that is very, very tough. But on the contrary, I just want to say this, right? Everybody is driving the car on the street. Now, what is the driver currently doing, right? When the driver would save themselves, right? That's what we assume, correct? And we cannot ensure whether what will the driver do at that point in minute, and we don't audit the driver's brain, for example. Right? We are all driving the cars. There is no audit or there is no question on this. When machines do it, these questions start coming in. At least starting to talk about these questions are at least a big step, because today we don't talk about it with drivers, right? We don't ask them, hey, when you hit the car, whom are you going to save first? Even whatever.
Sure.
First of all, I think this question is from Tapabrata. So Tapabrata, smart city is not a individual project that government of India is taking. And there are various projects just like smart city that, NEGD has prescribed. I'm not sure what the answer is, but it is governed by the same one policy of government of India who owns it. And in my view, the government owns it, not the service provider, but it's better checked there. So you refer to the latest policy that has come out a couple of months back about it. But coming to the second part of it, so as Matangi said, it's very difficult to judge what's going to happen, but that's where the next frontier of using artificial intelligence comes into play. The role of the interface of human and machine learning is really, really important over here. And what the pundits are saying, that artificial intelligence will throw some options and the human intervention will bring in things like values, ethics, standards, vision to really pick the option that's the right option for that particular scenario. So, in your questions context, I'll just refine this question a bit more to really make my point. If you are alone and you see a family of six getting killed because of your wrong decision right now, they don't be surprised. Will be drivers who will take a decision to kind of save the family and not really worry about themselves. That's what Rahul Siddharth's next part is, bringing emotional quotient to the AI. And that's what human intervention will bring in. I'm sure it doesn't have a perfect answer. People will question that driver who will put himself to risk to save that family of six. But I don't think there will be a challenge going forward because emotional intelligence will also get built through human intervention to AI. It will not be a simple black or white answer to it for sure. Tapakrita. With that, I'll pass it back to Dr. Bikramji.
Yeah, thanks, Matangi. So, they're all right. It can be both. So I think the first effort will be on both fronts. And then comes the question of trade-off. And then there will be different scenarios, and those simulations will go behind the automation of the decision. But it will be driven by certain policy and certain legal framework, right? And that's really work in progress. So there is no easy answer at this moment. Neither are self-driven cars are really rampant at this moment in India. So yeah, it will evolve and we will test the best practices, but an interesting question nonetheless. Before I wrap up, one thing I sort of intriguing and interesting, that many questions were around privacy, governance, ethics that the students are really bringing forward, rather than nuances related to data usage, application areas, algorithms, and all that. So that's a very interesting shift and drift because it really shows the mindset of the young students. They are very conscious about the privacy elements, about the government, about the ethics element. So augurs very very well for us from a future generation standpoint. Great. So
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, and thanks, sir, for giving us such an insight on and how the discussion works to industrial revolutions, selecting the future in terms of. So I'll now call upon Professor Satya to talk.
Munish Gupta, sir. It's a pleasure listening to your insights and experiences about data and decisions on various aspects of decision making using data. I know that all of you as a panel have put in a lot of hard work in trying to organize your thoughts and structured it very beautifully in terms of careers in data and the data sciences, using the relevant use cases and also setting the context. I personally thank Dr. Bikramji Chowdhury for his efforts to chair the session. And thank you, Matangi and Munish, for being part of this panel. Much appreciated. And we look forward to more such opportunities for our students to interact with you on a separate note. Thank you so much.
Thank you.